Hello everyone, this is another UI tutorial. This is going to be how to make a scatter plot in Unity. Um, this is a very simple scatter plot. You'll probably want to expand on it, especially because it doesn't even have any X or Y axis labels. It's just numbers, and so you don't even know what the X or Y axis represent, so you'd have to add that, but this is just to get you started. So here's what it looks like. X-axis, y-axis, each point you can see where it should be on the x-axis and where it should be on the y-axis, and it lines up fairly well. Pretty simple. Let's look at what happens when I start in the hierarchy. So you see I got this. This is the holder for everything. I have the y-axis, which is the labeling or the numbers for the y-axis, and then I've got the x-axis. And then I've instantiated these children based on the size of the screen and based on the this value here, x increment and y increment. So this value determines how many, or by how much each of these labels will increase by. So, or each of these values. So I'm increasing by 100 in the x direction, so it's 100, 200, 300, and then I'm doing the same thing in the y direction. So if I, just to show you what happens if I were to change that, let's set this to 200. So now I'm incrementing by 200 every time, and that's why there's more space in between them. It's still basically the same graph though. Okay. Set it back to 100, and then let's go through. So these are the prefabs. This is the point that you see somewhere on here. It's populated with information during runtime, so that's why you can't see anything at the moment. And then we have this x value. These will get added to this x-axis, and then the same for the y-axis. That's how the values, these get spawned. And then this main is where the points will be. This is the parent of the points. So if I hit play, you can see here's where all the points are. And then this image is the 0, the big 0. In fact, that should just be called 0. Okay, so that's everything in the hierarchy. Let's look at the script now. So first I have this class, point class, just a easy way to store x and y of the point, and then also to store the object associated with the point. I'm not even sure we actually end up needing this, but it's nice to have it there. So we have the canvas, which is just, there's only one canvas in this case, but this is the main canvas. We have the x-axis, which it's more like a holder than anything else, a holder for all the labels, the numbers, and then we have the y-axis. And we have main, which, as I said before, is where the points get spawned into. This x increment and y increment, I already explained that. They're defaulted to 100. And then here's all our prefabs. The point prefab, x axis prefab, and y axis prefab. And we don't have this yet, but we need to get the width and the height of the canvas, which is the same as the width and height of the screen, because the canvas stretches to screen size. If you go back to our canvas, you can see it's scaling with screen size. Oops. Okay, so we also need a list of points. This list is going to store all of the points that we're spawning inside or as children to main. And this function right here, this call right here, allows us to get the canvas size even though the canvas will be changing at runtime, because it's scaling. So if we look at the canvas, right now it's 1920 by 1080. It should stay that way because that's what our screen size is. If we were to change the screen size, let's try this. You can see it's different now, and we might need this value to help us. Oh, this is really small, but we want that value in order to correctly place things on the canvas. So that's what this is. We're grabbing the canvas width and height. We're subtracting 100 because we want to make sure these points aren't right on the edge. And so we're just going to leave 100 units of padding for everything to make sure that nothing is like right on the edge of the screen, because that doesn't really look good. And then I have this function which creates random points. Hopefully you'd want to load points from some kind of data source. And so this is just for this demo, but you probably won't even want to use this create random points function. You will need this draw points function. That's where it basically creates and puts the points, and then this draw axis, which draws the x and y number labels. Okay, so that's what everything does. Everything is done in start. This isn't dynamic, which means that you can't change the size at runtime of the canvas and it'll recalculate everything. You can make it dynamic. I haven't. I don't expect people to need their scatterplots to be dynamic. Usually it's you just set it up one time at runtime and then that should be it. But let's go into each of these functions. So we'll go into draw points. This is assuming we already have points inside our list here. And we've added those points using this random point generator. And this number just means how many points I want to generate, which is 10 in this case. And so we're looping through those 10 points. We're creating a point, using the prefab. We're instantiating a point. We are setting the parent of that point to the main object or the point holder, essentially. And using the rect transform of the point, we're going to make sure its anchors are set to this corner right here. That's what the 0, 0 is. It's this corner. And then now that the anchors are set here, we can just use the point values to determine where on the canvas the point should be. So we've set the anchors to that bottom left corner, which is 0, 0 on the graph as well. And then now we can just set the anchored position, which means using the anchors, we're going to set the position to the x value, the y value, and the z value is always 0. So for instance, if I hit play, this value right here is 102, 187. That means it's 102 units from this 0 coordinate in the x direction, 187 units from the 0 coordinate in the y direction. We actually look at it. Should be under main. Let's see, which point is it? This point. Okay, so you'll see the actual x and y values are also 102, 187. So that's pretty simple. I didn't really need to change anything because since the anchors are at 0, 0, the actual x and y values are going to be also the unit position of the object. So that's how I did that calculation. You just need to make sure you set the anchors to 0, 0. Otherwise, they'll be centered of this. They'll be centered on the main, the parent. Essentially, they'll be centered on the parent, and everything will be shifted to the right. So your start point, instead of it being in the bottom left at 0, 0, it'll be at the center of the parent. Okay. And so after we've positioned the point, we want to make sure the point knows its the point class knows its own game object. So we set that, and then we want to set the label that's right above each point. So this label right here, 131.404, with the thing in parentheses, that's what this is. We're just grabbing that text and we're setting that text to this string. Okay, that's it for drawing the points. The only other function really is draw axis, so let's look at that. So this takes in an x-axis count and a y-axis count. This is how many units of measurement we want to draw. So for this side, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then for this one we have 17. And that might not make sense right now why there's that amount, but let's look at how we calculate that. So we calculate that by taking the width and we divide it by the increment. So the width, if you look at the screen, it's 1920 by 1080. However, we're subtracting 100 for the padding, right? So that makes it 1820 by 980. If it's 980 and we're dividing by x increment, that's going to be 980 divided by 100, which is 98. And then we want to turn this to an int. It's actually going to be a float value, but we want to turn it into an int. And so we're just going to round that to, we need to round it down. So we're going to round it to 9 values, which is what we're getting. So 980 divided by 100 is 9.8, and because we're using this int cast, we basically chop off that 0.8, so we get 9. And then for the height, the width was actually 1820, right? Because 1920 minus 100, 1820. So 1820 we divide by 100 is 18.2. We chop off that 0.2, and so we get 18. Now we only had 17 values, so let's talk about why 17 instead of 18. So if we go back to Unity, the portion that we're calculating this width and height from, it's not the entire canvas. It's just this this main canvas. So this canvas, or this parent for all of the points, this is what we need to know the width and height of. We don't need to know the whole canvas width and height. So instead of it being 1920 and 1080, it's actually 1920 minus whatever, let's see, whatever this space is, and 1080 minus whatever this, and then I think these are the same, but the same distance. And so that's why it's actually a little bit less. In fact, let's I put in a debug here. Let's debug real quick. We don't need this. Well, might be nice to see too. But let's debug the x-axis, how many the count is. So the width of the x-axis is actually 1674. Okay, and when you chop off the 74, because if you divide 1674 by 100, you get 16.74. You just get 16. And the way we're looping, we're starting at 0 and we're ending at 16, which is why we have 17 values, right? And then it's the same with the y. We can even debug the y real quick. We don't need that, but let's just. So the y-axis count is 8, and remember we're going from 0 to 8, which gives us 9 values. So let me get rid of these. But that is how we get this x-axis count and y-axis count. Just make sure you keep in mind it's not the width of the entire canvas, it's the width of the entire canvas minus the x and y axes. Okay, so let's go through the rest of draw axis. These spacers are once again just increment values. I just stored them locally. We're looping through the x-axis count, which is 16 in this case, but it's 0 including 16, so it's 17 values. And then we are instantiating that prefab for the x-axis. We're setting the parent to the x-axis, and let's go through this a little bit. So we have to name the text of the object based on the spacer, which is the increment, so x spacer is 100 in this case, multiplied by I plus 1, because I starts at 0, and we want this spacer to start at 100, not at 0. So 0 plus 1 is 1, and then we have 100 times 1, which is 100, and that's our first one. And then it's the same thing for every other iteration of this for loop. And we do the same. We do something similar for y, but it's not the exact same. In the y direction, it would be backwards if we did the exact same thing, and I'll actually show you what I mean. So if we change this to I plus 1, I need one more parenthesis. We change this to I plus 1 like it is here, and then we hit play. You'll see now 100 is at the top and 900 is at the bottom. Obviously that's not what we want. This is just the difference between adding stuff in a horizontal versus a vertical parent. And so instead what we're going to do, we could do an inverse loop. That's another method. You could just do a backwards for loop, or you could just start at the last value, and I mean these both versions start at the last value. Here, this is just another way to start at the last value. So take the y-axis count, which I believe was 8, and then we take 1 minus I, 1 minus 0 is 0, 8 plus 1 is 9. Sorry, 1 minus 0 is 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. There's our 900 value. 1 minus 1 is 0, so 800 plus 0 is 800. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. 800 plus negative 1 is 7, so 700, etc., etc. And then quickly we can look through the create random points. It's just going to loop through the count that I gave it, and it's going to create a new point which needs an x and a y, and these are just some x and y values. The x value you can change to be a little higher, I think, because we're going up to 17. In fact, we could just change this to 17. And then we get a more spread out graph, or scatter plot. And that's it. That's all there is with the scatter plot. It's still very basic. You should probably add some more, especially if you're going to use this in a project, but this is just to help you get started. Anyways, so that's all I have. Thank you for watching, and I should have another video soon of how to make a bar chart in Unity. Okay, bye-bye.